So everything what happens to us is our prarabdha. But the process which led to it could be also mixed with our will. Then everything we want is our will. But if it comes true, it means there was also our prarabdha driving it and ended up in the result. The sign for that is that we achieved what we wanted.
Yeah.
So we can try as much as we want to achieve something or change something. In this sense, prarabdha has the final word.
Yes, that is what we experience is entirely determined by prarabdha. What we experience in the sense of what happens to us, because then people confuse the matter by saying, oh, but I desire something. That's also something I experience my desires. It's not in that sense. Prarabdha means it is the fruit of our past actions. So it is what the things that happen to us, not what we, how we respond to that or what other desires we have. So what we are to experience, that is the domain of fate. What we want to experience, that is the domain of will. They're two entirely different things. What we want to experience cannot change what we are destined to experience. And what we are destined to experience cannot change what we want to experience.
Right. So what I noted next is actually where it comes a bit complicated to me, or like what is not clear. Maybe it is just the terminology.
Yes.
As I mentioned in the previous mail.
Yeah.
What like if you can maybe talk about what does it mean happens to us and achievement in this context? Because what I started to think is that I can look at it in a different way, saying that what I'm trying to do is an action which I can see as happening to me, or also I don't necessarily see the final result as an achievement, but I can see the process of trying as the achievement. So in this sense, is my freedom to try also dependent on the prarabdha? And I will probably later tell you why I was also thinking about this in a context of the Upadēśa Undiyār of the first verse, because there is, or I can actually come to it now, that there is that word payam or pala, which what I got that little booklet from Ramana, a book, and it says that's the payam on pala is a resulting pleasure and pain which has to be experienced by the person who does that action.
Yeah.
So okay, I'm gonna continue with the note what I got. Maybe hopefully you will get it all together, because it's kind of mixed up. And so what I noted next is, so the example for this could lead to saying that even as Bhagavan said in notes to his mother, that we can try as much as we want to change or try to achieve something. If it's not in our prarabdha, it's not going to happen. And then it can lead into conclusion that even our freedom of will in trying to change something or achieve depends also on our prarabdha, meaning that we might not be even able to try if that's not in our prarabdha. And that's what I was actually, just a few minutes ago, I was thinking about that. And it's kind of clear to me that this is the same thing about like dispute fate and free will. It's just from a different view.
It can be framed in so many ways, but that is the thing is the law of karma. The basis of the law of karma is that we do act according to our will. We want something, that is, most of our actions are driven by desire for something. We want to bring about some result. We want to achieve something. We want to experience something. That is why we act. If we didn't have any desire for anything, we would not be motivated to act. We would just keep quiet. But we are constantly acting, and our actions are driven by our will. In other words, by our vasanas, by our likings or inclinations to enjoy this or experience that. So if we didn't have that freedom to want what we want and to try to achieve what we want, in other words, the freedom of will and the freedom of action, there would be no. That is the basis on which the karma theory is. The law of karma is based on the fact that we do have that. So if people who deny that we have any freedom of will and action, basically they're denying the karma theory, because they're denying the very basis of it. So the actions we do according to our will, or driven by our will, are called agamya. Those actions cannot bear fruit in this lifetime, because what we are to experience in this lifetime is what has been preordained. So the fruit of those actions get stored in what is called sanchita, and from sanchita God can select which fruit we are to experience in each life. Fruit here means, as you say, the pleasures and pains, but it's generally said pleasures and pains, but a lot of the actions we do are not particularly good actions or particularly bad actions. If many actions are morally neutral. So morally neutral actions bring about experiences that are neither particularly pleasant nor particularly unpleasant, neither pleasure nor pain. So there's the law of karma is a moral law. If you as you sow, so you shall reap. Basically, that is, whatever actions we do have consequences, and we will. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 38 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, if we are a doer of actions, we will have to experience the resulting fruit. So that is the basis on which the law of karma is there, but we do have this freedom of will and action. But though we have this freedom of will and action, we don't have any freedom over the outcome of our the fruit of our actions. That is, I want to experience a certain thing, so I make effort for it. Whether I experience that or not has nothing to do with my freedom of will. It's according to my destiny, which is the fruit of actions that I've done in earlier lives according to my will. So actually everything is, even the prarabdha, the prarabdha originated from our misuse of our will. So, but it's not connected to our present will. Now we may experience certain things which are not what we want to experience at all. But however much we don't want to experience that, we cannot change it. So in order to understand the law of karma, we have to understand that both these, both fate and will, both are acting, both are playing a role. So what we want to experience, that is entirely the domain of will. What we are to experience, that's entirely the domain of fate. The only question arises with regard to the actions we are doing now. Most actions we do, we are doing driven by our will to a greater or lesser extent. However, in order for us to experience whatever we're destined to experience, there are some actions we need to do. So our body, speech, and mind will be made to do those actions that are necessary for us to do in order to experience whatever is our destiny. But people say, well, is this action, is this according to destiny or is it according to will? We cannot say. That is, if you want to do it, if you're doing it to achieve something, which almost all our actions are motivated by a desire of some sort, form or other, a desire or fear or something. So almost all actions we do are agamya. Some of them are also prarabdha. And there may be some actions we do without any intention at all. We have we're not driven by desire, we're just driven by destiny. But those actions are probably fairly few. So most of our actions, we are doing things because we want to achieve something. Even accidental actions, there's usually a will behind them. We may not want to bring about that, because it's an accident, we don't want to bring about that action, but our will was driving us to do some action that resulted in an accident. So the will is the main driver in all these things. The only thing is, we cannot experience what we want to experience unless it is destined. And if it is destined for us to experience, whether we want it or not, it's going to happen. We're going to experience it. So actually, it is extremely simple. It is complicated by our questions because we want to know what is unnecessary to know. So why should we believe this law of karma? Whereas most of Bhagavan's teachings, Bhagavan's core teachings about what we are, that is, we can logically, deductively conclude that we are not this body. The fact that we are aware of ourselves without being aware of this body in some states means this body cannot be what we actually are. So by deduction, we can say, even though we now experience ourselves as I am this body is not what I actually am, because I'm aware of myself in the absence of this body in sleep. So that is a deductive inference. We can be absolutely sure about that. Other aspects of Bhagavan's teaching, such as the unreality of the world, we cannot deduct. You cannot deductively prove that the world is unreal or that the world is just a mental projection. But generally, we all believe the world exists out there independent of our perception of it. But when we consider the matter carefully, it's clear we have absolutely no evidence. There's no evidence that the world, that anything exists independent of our perception of it. So by inductive reasoning, that is, if we consider the evidence when there's no evidence for something, it's reasonable to conclude that if there's no evidence for it, then we shouldn't believe it. So we have no reason to believe that the world exists independent of ourselves. And another reason, since we now experience a world only when we experience ourselves as a body, whether in waking or in dream. Since we know this awareness, I am this body, is false, and since our awareness of the world is based on our awareness of ourselves as a body, we know perception of the world is based upon a misperception of ourselves. So we can make a very strong case. We cannot actually prove logically, but we can make a very strong case for the unreality of the world. When it comes to the law of karma, why should we believe the law of karma? Is there any logical reason? I mean, we may believe it because this is what Bhagavan has taught us. That's a reasonable reason, because we know we know Bhagavan is trustworthy from all the rest of his teachings, and what he points out to us is reasonable for us to conclude Bhagavan is trustworthy. Bhagavan is worthy of our belief, of our trust. So we can believe it for that reason. But there's another good reason for believing the law of karma. We need to understand why Bhagavan taught us this law of karma. For that, we need to go back to the basics. But one aim of Bhagavan's teachings is to turn our attention back towards ourselves. That is the natural flow of our attention. When we rise as ego, the natural flow of our attention is outwards. That is away from ourselves towards other things. Outwards here means everything other than I is outwards. It's extraneous to us. Inward in this context means I alone is what is inside. Everything else, all our thoughts, our feelings, all phenomena, all objects of experience are outside. In this sense, we're using inside and outside here. So the natural tendency of our the natural flow of our attention is away from ourselves towards other things, whether they be thoughts or feelings or objects or whatever it may be. It's things other than I. So that is the natural, and so long as our attention is going away from ourselves towards other things, we experience ourselves as ego. And as ego, we always experience ourselves as I am this body. That is why whenever we experience ourselves as I am this body, we experience the other phenomena. And whenever we experience other phenomena, we experience ourselves as one among them, namely a body. So these, we know from our experience, these constantly occur together. That is, the awareness I am this body and the awareness of other things always occur together. And they occur, so they both occur to ourselves as ego. So the nature of ego is firstly to be aware of itself as a body, and consequently to be aware of other forms. This is the nature of ego. So Bhagavan's sole aim is to turn our attention back towards ourselves, because we rise, stand, and flourish as ego only by attending to other things. If we turn our attention back towards ourselves to know what we actually are, ego will subside and dissolve back into its source. This is the nature of ego. By attending to other things, it rises and flourishes and sustains itself. By attending to itself, it brings about its own dissolution. So, since that is the nature of ego, as explained by Bhagavan, the sole aim of Bhagavan's teachings is to turn our attention away from other things back towards ourselves. However, because we experience ourselves as a body, we are so much concerned about the welfare of this body. And we also experience ourselves as a mind, and as a mind we also have, that is, we seek not only bodily pleasures, we also seek mental and intellectual pleasures. So we are seeking happiness outside ourselves through using this body, speech, and mind as our instruments. So so since this is the nature of ego, to be constantly engaging in action in order to experience things outside, and since Bhagavan's aim is to turn our attention back towards ourselves, he needs to, he does all he can to convince us that letting our attention go outwards is futile. We don't achieve anything thereby. That is, we believe if we want something and we try for it, we are likely to achieve it. And therefore we come to the conclusion, oh, because I worked hard, I now earned a lot of money, so I'm able to go on a holiday, or I'm able to buy a car or a house or whatever it is. We think it's because of the efforts that we've made in this lifetime. This is the general so-called common sense view. It seems to us, if I work hard, I earn more money. And if I earn more money, I'm able to do more with it. So the actions I'm doing in this lifetime are bringing about results in this life. That is how it seems to us. But that is not actually the case. And this is why Bhagavan teaches this law of karma. What is destined to happen, that is going to happen without fail. Whether we try for it or we don't try for it or try to obstruct it, it's going to happen. Likewise, what is not going to happen is not going to happen no matter how much we may want it and no matter how much we may try for it. Therefore, trying to achieve anything external, making effort to experience anything other than ourselves is a futile effort, because what we are to experience, we are going to experience. the only immediate result, we can say, of trying for things other than ourselves, that is, the more we make effort to achieve things or to avoid things, the more we are feeding our desires and thereby leading to discontent. So we are only increasing we are not changing the pleasures and pains that we are to experience, but we are increasing our discontent, because the discontent is a product of will. That is, it's a feature of the will to be constantly discontented. So in order to turn our attention within, we need to cease making effort to achieve anything. That's why in the 13th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār is particularly instructive in this context. And if we read that 13th paragraph and think about it, think deeply about it, we can see why Bhagavan taught us this, the law of karma as he taught it. That is, our aim is to eradicate ego. Another way, in terms of bhakti, what in the jnana path we call eradication of ego, in bhakti is called surrender, giving ourselves to God. It's just two ways of saying the same thing. So what is giving ourselves to God? Bhagavan says in the, what actually, how can we surrender ourselves to God? Bhagavan answered that question in the first sentence of the 13th paragraph. What he says there is, the main clause of the sentence is Atma-vichara paranai iripade tanai isanako alipada. That means being Atma-vichara alone is giving oneself to God. So what does Atma-vichara mean? Atma-vichara, nishta means being firm, so, or being fixed or established. So being firmly established, and nishtaparan is one who is firmly fixed. So Atma-vichara means one who is firmly fixed in oneself. That means we can either we can explain it in two ways, but they both amount to the same thing. We can either say we're established as ourselves, we are just being ourselves, or we can say we are established, our attention is established in ourselves. We are being self-attentive, but actually there's one and the same, because it's by attending to ourselves that we are being ourselves. So being Atma-vichara is giving ourselves to God. That's the main clause. So how to be Atma-vichara is what he explains in the first clause of the sentence. Atma-vichara tavira means accept Atma-chintane tavira means accept Atma-chintane. Atma-chintane literally means thought of oneself. It implies self-attentiveness, being self-attentive. So accept self-attentiveness. Vera chintane kalambavatu satram idam kadamo. Not giving even the slightest room to the rising of any thought other than self-attentiveness. So how can we avoid giving room to the rising of any other thought? Simply by being keenly self-attentive, we give no room to the rising of other thoughts. Why? Because no thought can rise unless we attend to it. So if we've got our attention firmly fixed on ourselves, we are thereby giving no room to the rising of any other thought. So by clinging firmly to Atma-chintana, that is the self-attentiveness or being self-attentive, we are thereby giving no room to the rising of other thoughts. Other thoughts means whenever we allow our attention to go towards anything other than ourselves, that is what Bhagavan refers to here as other thoughts. That is, the movement of our mind away from ourselves towards something else is a thought. So we are giving no room to those thoughts because our whole attention is fixed on ourselves. So there's no room for any other thoughts to arise in our awareness. It's only when we allow our attention to go away from ourselves that other thoughts can rise, that we can become aware of things other than ourselves. So what Bhagavan says in this sentence is essentially very simple. That is, attending to ourselves and thereby being ourselves, attending to ourselves so keenly that we give no room to rising of any other thought, and thereby being as we are, that is giving ourselves to God. Why is it giving ourselves to God? What is the self we are to give to God? Obviously, we cannot give to God what we actually are. but we can give to God what we seem to be. That is the tanne, the self that we are to give to God is ego. What is ego? Ego is just a false awareness of ourself. It is, instead of being aware of ourselves just as I am, we're aware of ourselves as I am this person, I am this body, I am Rene or I am Michael. So that false awareness, if we give up that false awareness, what remains is the real awareness I am. So our aim is to give up this ego, which is always aware of itself as I am this body, and which is consequently aware of other things. So in order to do that, we need to, in order to know how to give up this ego, we need to understand the nature of ego. That Bhagavan has explained very clearly. For example, in verse 25 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, that is, the nature of ego. Ego comes into existence, it stands and it flourishes by grasping form. Grasping form means ego itself is a formless phantom. So all forms are things other than ego. But in order to be aware of other forms, ego first needs to be aware of itself as a form. As Bhagavan says in verse 4 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, Urun Tanayin Ulhu Paramatran. If oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. If oneself is not a form, who can see their forms and how? So the other forms seem to exist only when we are aware of ourselves as a form. We can see this clearly in dream. As soon as we begin dreaming, we're aware of a world full of so many different forms, including forms means not only physical forms, feelings, memories, all these, and all things that are, all objects are forms of one kind or another. So we're aware of all other forms, in so many other forms in a dream. But before we, as soon as we're aware of other forms, we're aware of ourselves as one among those forms. We're not watching the dream from outside. We have a point of view in the dream because we experience ourselves as a body within that dream. So experiencing ourselves as a body and experiencing other things, these always happen hand in hand. And this is the nature of ego. So long as we are aware of anything other than ourselves, whether this body or any other form, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. So when we're aware of other things, we're aware of ourselves as if we were ego. So in order to get rid of this ego, we need to cease being aware of any forms, anything other than ourselves. And in order to cease being aware of anything other, okay, I'll just say one other thing. Merely ceasing to be aware of other things is only a temporary solution, because all the forms we experience are things projected by us. So projecting all this vast universe and all the happenings in it requires energy. So after 16 hours or so of projecting things, we get tired. And when we're too tired to continue this projection, we doze off to sleep. Dozing off to sleep means ego subsides. And when ego subsides, everything else subsides along with it. So in sleep, we remain free of, there's no ego and no phenomena. We're in a peaceful state. But ego rises again. After some hours in sleep, we again rise again. Of course, the hours in sleep, we don't experience any passing of time in sleep, but from the perspective of a waking or dream state, we say, oh, I slept for 6 hours or 8 hours or whatever. But that's only from the perspective of ego in waking state. So though ego subsides in sleep by withdrawing its attention from all other things, ego is not annihilated because it withdraws its attention from other things, ego dissolves back into its source. And after ego has dissolved in its source, what remains? Pure awareness. That pure awareness doesn't destroy ego because ego has already subsided. That is, it's as if, I mean, the pure awareness is always there, but we're aware of the pure awareness on its own only after ego subsides. So what we need to do is to bring about the subsidence of ego as a result of experiencing the pure awareness. As I say, pure awareness is what we actually are, and pure awareness means awareness that is not aware of anything other than itself. So when so long as our attention is going out towards other things, we're aware of ourselves as I am this body, and we're therefore not aware of ourselves as we actually are. Therefore, in order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we need to turn our attention back towards ourselves. When we turn our attention back towards ourselves, because the ego is no longer grasping form, it begins to subside and dissolve back into its source. So the way to surrender ego is only by turning our attention within. That's why he begins this first sentence of the 13th paragraph, except Atma-vichara. That means except self-attentiveness, giving no room to rising of any other thoughts. That means attending to nothing other than ourselves is giving ourselves to God, in short. So our aim now is to withdraw our attention, to attend to ourselves so keenly that we cease to attending to anything else. That is our aim, but that brings about surrender, and surrender means we return to our natural state of being as we actually are. So we need to have a reason in order to attend only to ourselves. We need to give up our motivation to go outwards. So long as we think that by doing this action or that action, whether by mind, speech, or body, we bring about some result, our mind will be constantly going outwards, looking for, seeking for this and that we want. Because why do we want those things? Because we think happiness is derived from those things. So as I say, the whole aim of Bhagavan's teachings is to turn our attention back towards ourselves. So in order to make us willing to turn our attention back towards ourselves, he needs to explain why attending to anything else is futile. So this is the purpose of the law of karma. Trying to achieve anything is futile, because whatever you try to achieve, you cannot experience it in this lifetime. And if your aim is to experience something in some future life, in heaven or wherever, again, you're allowing your attention to go out, but you're away from yourself. You're seeking happiness outside yourself, whether in this world or in some other world. You want to be happy. So, but you think just like now we think our happiness depends upon having sufficient food, having adequate clothing and shelter, having the enjoyments of life, watching our favorite television program or a football match or this or that, or owning a nice car or whatever be our desires. We think we're going to derive happiness from the objects of our desire. So our mind is constantly going outward. If we think the pleasures of this world are very petty pleasures, it's much better to attain the pleasures of heaven, which are far greater, we're still looking for happiness outside ourselves. So the aim of Bhagavan's teachings is to stop us looking for happiness outside ourselves and make us understand that happiness can be found only within. So the law of karma, as taught by Bhagavan, if we understand it and are willing to accept that, that will help us a lot in this path of surrender, because we will know whatever we do, we're not going to achieve anything. That is, I may want to be very rich, for example, but if it's not my destiny to be very rich, however much I toil, however much I try, I'm not going to become very rich. So trying to become rich is futile. If I'm destined to be rich, I cannot avoid being rich. Even if I become rich and I give away all my money, if I'm destined to stay rich, money will come in its place. So however much I try to give away the money I've got, if I'm destined to always have money, money will come from some source or other. So whatever is destined to happen is going to happen. When we understand that, we understand the futility of trying to achieve anything other than ourselves. All efforts to experience things other than ourselves are just creating fresh karma. They cannot bring about any result in this lifetime. Only in a future lifetime, they may or may not be experienced, depending on whether God chooses to select them as part of our prarabdha in a future life. So the aim of the law of karma is to help. It's one more tool in our toolkit to help us to withdraw our mind from other things. If we are firmly convinced, as Bhagavan says, what is destined to happen is going to happen, what is destined not to happen is not going to happen, no matter how much effort you make for it to be otherwise, it's not going to, what's not going to happen is not going to happen. And what is going to happen is going to happen. So we cannot avoid that. If we are firmly convinced of that, we will automatically stop making effort to go outwards, and it'll make it much easier for us to turn our attention inward. So why should we believe the law of karma? But we should believe it partly because it's what Bhagavan has taught us, but also because our aim is to be perfectly happy, to experience infinite happiness, devoid of misery, unalloyed happiness. That's what we are all seeking, one way or another. So if we understand that happiness doesn't lie outside, happiness lies only within, and whatever we do to achieve happiness outside, we're only going to achieve those things that we are destined to experience. So in this way, all these ancillary teachings of Bhagavan, they are aids to help us turn our attention back towards ourselves. That's why in this sentence, in this paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, but the 13th paragraph, I'll continue reading that because it's relevant in this context. He says in the second sentence, Isam peril evelo bharate patalum avalavayum abavahitu kolkera. That means however much burden, or though we put any amount of burden on God, he will bear it all. That means we can surrender everything to God and he will take care of it all. We don't have to worry about anything. So that's a very great assurance. We actually have no responsibility. We need to have no care or concern about anything. If we surrender it to God, he will take care of it. That's helping us to lose interest in making effort for external things. We can leave everything to God. If I'm to have my food today, I will have it somehow or other. I can just leave it to him to take care of such thing. We like that with everything, we can leave to his care. Then if we are destined to have a nice meal today, but there's no one to cook for us, according to our destiny, our body, speech, and mind will be made to go and buy the ingredients and cook the meal. But that's no concern of ours, because our aim is just to leave everything to him. So we leave even our body, speech, and mind to him. So if we don't allow our will to interfere, if we leave everything to him, then whatever actions are done by our body, speech, and mind are in accordance with his will. So all we need to do is to curb our own will. So that's what he's saying in the third sentence. Sakala karengalayum or Parameshwara Shakti Nadatu Kondir Padiyal, when the one when one's supreme ruling power is driving all karyas, everything that's meant to happen is being driven by that one supreme divine power. Instead of namam adaku adangi raman, instead of us just yielding ourselves to that, ipadi vendum, apadi vendum, endru sada chimtipadein. Why should we be constantly thinking it's necessary to do like this, it's necessary to do like that? That is, we can leave everything to him. Whatever actions our body, speech, and mind are destined to do, they will be made to do. So, and any other actions we do, but we're not destined to do, are not going to change anything, so they're futile. So we can leave everything, all our concerns, both about ourselves and about our loved ones, our family, our children, our parents, whatever it is. Everything is happening according to prarabdha, so we need to have no care at all. Then he ends this paragraph giving an analogy to illustrate what he said in the third sentence. That is, though we know that the steam engine or the train is bearing all the burdens, it's carrying all the burdens. That is, if we're traveling on a train, the train is pulling not only us, but everything else in the train. So the train is carrying all the burden. Why should we, who are traveling in that train, carry our little luggage on our head? No, instead of putting aside our luggage and traveling at ease, why should we be carrying that luggage on our head? So when the train is carrying all the burden, whether we put our luggage on the floor or on the seat or on the luggage rack, the train is going to carry it. Carrying it on our head is futile. Likewise, any efforts we make for anything external is futile, because whatever is to happen is going to be made to happen. So if we think deeply about this paragraph, we can understand why Bhagavan taught the law of karma as he taught it. Yes, we do have the freedom of will and action. We are free to want whatever we want, and we are free to try to achieve whatever we want. Whether we succeed in achieving it or not, but it won't happen unless it is in our destiny. So if we understand the purpose of the law of karma, firstly, we understand why we have a good reason to believe it, because it saves us it's good. If you're traveling in a train, there's a good reason for believing that the train will carry all your burden. Even if you can't prove it, if you're ready to believe that the train will carry all your burden, you're saved from the bother of carrying it on your head. You can simply put it aside and the train will carry it. So like that, if we are willing to accept the law of karma as taught by Bhagavan, it saves us from a tremendous amount of that. It's a great burden off our mind. We don't have to be concerned about anything other than ourselves. So this is the purpose of the law of karma. But people, as soon as they hear the law of karma, they begin asking so many questions. Is this action according to destiny, or is this action according to will? All this is totally irrelevant. This is missing the point. The point is, whatever is destined to happen is going to happen. We cannot change that however much we want to change it and however much we try to change it. Therefore, we should give up trying to change anything. Let things happen as it is to happen. Our only duty is to surrender ourselves. How do we surrender ourselves? Without a care in the world, we need to turn our whole attention back towards ourselves. This is the whole purpose of it. If we understand this purpose, we won't be asking unnecessary questions. What does it matter whether any particular action is driven by fate or by will? If it's driven by fate, we have no say in the matter. We cannot avoid doing that action. If it is driven by our will, how can we avoid doing actions driven by our will? We cannot. If we wait for the desire to rise and then try to control the action, we're dealing with it in the wrong way. We need to control the desire. If you control your will, if we keep the will subdued without going outwards, then automatically whatever, we won't engage in actions driven by our will. It's only when we allow ego to rise that we begin to act under the sway of our will, our vasanas. So the thing to do is to keep the ego ever subsided. We do that by, as Bhagavan says in this sentence, by giving no room to the rising of any thought other than Atma-chintana. Then everything will happen as it's to happen according to destiny, but we will be unconcerned about it. We'll be totally unmindful of it. Does this help to answer the questions at all?
Right, thank you. I totally understand this. Also, the 13th paragraph is beautiful. I love it. It's just as it is said in the 13th paragraph, if we are not giving any other attention other than Atma Chintana.
Yes.
So, but to be honest, I'm not doing that 100%.
No.
So,
right.
So unless I'm not 100% in this,
yeah,
then there is still some other thought. There is still seeming world, seeming body, which seems to be me, and desires. So in this sense, it's difficult for us, as we know, to say if our action is by will or by prarabdha. So we can't say.
We can't say, and it's no use. Even if you could you were able to know which action is which. But as I say, they're so mixed up. You can't. We can't. But even if you could know, how would it be of any benefit to us? What we know is the agamya, the actions driven by our desire, we will do agamya so long as we rise as ego. Because as soon as we rise as ego, we have likes and dislikes and desires and attachments and hopes and fears. All these things are the sprouting of our vasanas. And the vasanas sprout as soon as we rise as ego. So having risen as ego, the nature of ego, it rises and then it wanders under the sway of its vasanas, as Bhagavan says. So but we need to try as much as possible to curb the rising of ego. And in order to curb the rising of ego, I mean, the ego and its vasanas are so closely intertwined, because as soon as we rise as ego, we've got likes and dislikes. And because we've got likes and dislikes, we rise more. So we need to, we curb the ego along with its, that is, by curbing the ego, we curb its desires, its vasanas. By curbing the vasanas, we're also curbing the ego. So they're not actually two different things. That is, as Bhagavan said, the seed form of all likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and so on is what he called Vishaya vasanas. Vishaya vasanas, Vishaya means phenomena. Vasana means inclination. So our inclination towards phenomena, in other words, our inclination to attend to other things, is the problem. And only when we have an inclination to turn to other things do we rise as ego. So Vishaya vasanas are the very nature of ego. Of course, there's something other than ego, because we are not our desires, but it is our nature as ego to have desires, to have likes, dislikes, to have inclinations to go outward. So the same practice by which we curb the rising of ego, we are also curbing our desires, and vice versa. So by turning our attention within, we are curbing the rising of ego and curbing our desires. So if we don't turn within, we allow our mind to be wander under the sway of our vasanas. But even when we're allowing our mind to go outwards, we have many vasanas. So those vasanas will be pulling us in different directions. So we may have a liking. There may be one liking. I want to turn my attention within. But I also want to think about what I'm going to do, make my plans for tomorrow, or think about what I did yesterday and regret about it and lament, oh, I made a great mistake. I shouldn't have put my foot in my mouth, or whatever it may be. We constantly have that inclination to be thinking about things other than ourselves. But now we're trying to cultivate the inclination to think about ourselves. So even in the midst of other activities, even when our mind is going outwards, we need to be curbing our vasanas, and we need to be very careful where we allow our mind to go. Even when our mind is acting under the sway of the vasanas, some vasanas are more are going to pull us away from ourselves more than other vasanas. For example, having come to Bhagavan, we now have an interest in his teachings, an inclination to listen to his teachings, to think about his teachings. These are still things other than ourselves, but it's better to be thinking about his teachings than to be thinking about our financial problems, or whether we're going to lose our job, or whether what's going to happen about this coronavirus, whether how the economy is going to be affected, how many people are going to die. There's so many things we can think about, but better than thinking about any worldly thing, thinking about Bhagavan's teachings is good. Why? Because the more we think about his teaching, the more we are encouraged to turn within. And also, if we are thinking about his teachings, if we read his teachings or think about them carefully, what is the central subject of all Bhagavan's teachings? Who am I? So if we are really, that is, they say, Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, the studying, the thinking about what we studied, reasoning about it, and making thinking deeply about it, and making all the connection, and the nididhyasana of the practice. These are three separate things, but they're not entirely separate. If we are doing the Sravana correctly, if we are correctly reading Bhagavan's teachings, where will our attention be going? It'll only be going towards I, because all his teachings are pointing towards I. Likewise, when we think about his teachings, the more we think about them, the more we should be turning our attention within. Someone asked, I saw a comment was on a post on one of my videos 1 or 2 days ago, which I haven't yet had time to reply to. Someone asked me, how much time do I spend in attending to myself? And whether I'm attending to myself even while talking. The whole point of talking about Bhagavan's teachings is to encourage us to attend to ourselves. So even while we're talking about this subject, what is the subject we're talking about? I. So where's our attention? Our attention is going, may not be going 100% within, but at least to some extent our attention, we are drawing our attention back towards ourselves constantly. So the whole of our life should be centered around this practice of self-attentiveness. Whatever we are doing, we should be trying to draw our attention back towards ourselves. There are some things we do, there's some things that it seems to be necessary for us to do, that take up more of our attention. But however much of our attention is on other things, supposing we've got a book we need to read in order, or we've got a manual we need to read in order to do certain piece of work or something. Even while doing that work that requires our attention to go outwards, whose attention is going outwards? Who is reading that book? I am. So that I is always there in the background. So even in the midst of other activities, we should be trying to hold on to that remembrance of I. That's what Bhagavan says, Swarupa Smarana. If we hold on to Swarupa Smarana, Nirantara, he says that uninterruptedly, that is without unceasingly holding on to that Swarupa Smarana until we attain our Swarupa, our own real nature, that alone is sufficient. So we should, even in the midst of other activities, we should be constantly trying to hold on to this self-attentiveness. So, and anything that is conducive to that, like reading Bhagavan's teachings, thinking about Bhagavan's teachings, talking about Bhagavan's teachings, is all good, because it's all helping us, encouraging us and reminding us to turn our attention back towards ourselves. So why I say this is, even when we rise as ego, and our attention is going outwards, but we need to prevent it going too far outwards. I mean, we can start thinking about the present state of the world, what's happening in American politics, what's happening in the coronavirus, what new strain is there. Firstly, we heard about this new strain in England. Then we heard about South Africa. Now they're talking about Brazil, some new strain from Brazil. So there's lots for us to think about. And now the attention of the world is on this pandemic. As soon as this pandemic is solved, some other problems will be there. There'll be fights between countries, and there'll be fights within countries between political parties and different people of different. The world is a constant drama. It has been a drama from the day one, and it'll continue being a drama because that's the nature of the world. So we can be dwelling on that drama as much as we like. The more we dwell on it, the more our mind is going away from ourselves. That's why in the 19th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, Bhagavan says, it is not appropriate to let the mind dwell much on worldly things. What he says is, Prapanja Vishayangalil Adikamai Manate Vidakudadu. That is, it is not appropriate, or one should not let one's mind dwell excessively on worldly matters, because the more we dwell on worldly matters, the more our attention is going away from ourselves, the more we are being swayed by our Vishaya vasanas. So even when we allow our mind to go outwards, we should be not allowing it to go too far outwards. Let it go no further than Bhagavan teaching, which will be constantly reminding us to turn within. So even when we are as you say, when we are not attending to ourselves exclusively all the 24 hours, most of the time we are attending to other things. Even while attending to other things, we can to some extent be attending to ourselves, and thereby, and by other means, like dwelling on Bhagavan's teachings and curbing our desires and everything, we can stop our mind going too far away from ourselves, going outwards with too much vigor. We can we can put a brake on the impetus with which the mind naturally goes outwards. In other words, we can curb our desires. This is what Bhagavan refers to in the 20th paragraph when he says, if one is continuously restraining or curbing the mind, wherever one may be, one can be. That curbing the mind means stopping the mind from going too far away from ourselves, trying to bring our attention back towards I. And even when it slips away from I, not letting it go too far away. So we need to be constantly, we do this both by trying to hold on to self-attentiveness and by trying to avoid being swayed too far away from ourselves by our Vishaya vasanas. So this is what it's all about. It doesn't matter. I mean, if we start thinking about, is this action destiny or is it free will? Attention is then on the action. Rather than dwelling on actions, we need to be dwelling on ourselves. If we turn our attention back towards ourselves, or at least curb the vasanas that are drawing our attention out away from ourselves, we slowly bring the mind under check, and we slowly bring the ego into a state where it's willing to yield itself, willing to subside more and more, and to give itself to God, to yield itself, in other words, surrender itself. So that's why I say we need to understand why Bhagavan taught us this law of karma. Bhagavan taught us the law of karma in order to free our mind from unnecessary thoughts. But many people, they start thinking more things instead of giving up thinking about anything other than ourselves. That is the essence of the law of karma as taught by Bhagavan, is you need not care about anything else. You need not attend to anything other than yourself. That's the whole point of the law of karma. But so if we begin to say, but is this action free will or is this action destiny? How are we to know the difference? We are missing the point. The point is, you need not think about anything other than yourself. What is going to happen is going to happen. What is not going to happen is not going to happen. Anything you do, any actions you do driven by your will is only perpetuating the problem. So don't think about anything other than yourself. Give not even the slightest room to rising of any thought other than Atma-vichara. That's the whole point of this. What Bhagavan talks about the law of karma. It's only for that purpose and that purpose alone. So we need to understand the basic principles of the law of karma. That is, We have freedom to will and act. The actions we do according to our driven by our freedom to will and act, produce fruit. Those fruit get stored in sanchita. That from the sanchita, something is selected. Some selection of fruit are chosen by God for us to experience in this lifetime. What He has decided that we are going to experience in this lifetime, that is what we're going to experience. We cannot experience any more or any less than that. Therefore, being concerned about anything else is unnecessary. That's all we need to know about the law of karma, nothing more than that. So it's a very, very simple law Bhagavan has taught us, very simple principle he's taught us. And the purpose for which he's taught it is very clear. So why should we break our heads about it?
That's true. What I see the futility in this, talking more and more about this and like getting it, piling up with more stuff. But that wasn't my intention actually. It was just what I was trying to actually, because I was explaining this to my friend, right?
Yeah.
And what I found that there is something which should be maybe put differently for me to understand it clearer. So what I can, from the 13th paragraph, because so what I will try to say what is the only thing which I'm not clear in, and I know that it's more we talk about it, it doesn't get actually deeper and clearer, but opposite. But there is a conclusion which I would like to draw in, which I also got a note. So just bear with me.
All right.
So because we don't know which action is by prarabdha or the will, then, and we are not all the time focusing our attention on ourselves, then, and also because the prarabdha is driving us to do action, then naturally we don't know if we become, if we are thinking about it, we can become confused if I am actually yielding myself and everything what is happening is by prarabdha, or maybe it is also my will still, because when I'm doing something, my brain starts to think, and phenomena around me are playing the role, and we somehow become like caught in this world, and many times we just forget about getting back to ourselves. And so that's why I'm saying that what Bhagavan wrote is very helpful, but from a different view, I can interpret this this little unclear thing, that I get kind of confused which action is which I'm actually not looking for the answer. It's not going to help me if I'm going to know if this is by my will or this is by prarabdha. It's just there is this unclear thing which we actually never find. This is not the point of our quest.
That is,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, if I can just to bridge it with what I was reading Upadēśa Undiyār yesterday, and I was really like deeply thinking about that was that's why that work came into existence, because it was like originally the Shiva was giving advice to those
Daraka,
yeah, in the forest, the rishis in the forest, which were actually what they were doing. That's what I'm not clear about, is like, can I actually say that I cannot achieve anything with my will, like purely with my will? And what I see in the Upadēśa Undiyār, an example of those rishis, that they were trying to perform the siddhis, right? To get the siddhis, and they were successful. So that's what I was thinking later. That how about the siddhis? Then I was looking at the 35th verse of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, where Bhagavan said that the only real siddhis is attainment of our real nature, which we always are, and then all the rest is just like in a dream, achieving it applies for everything, not just the extraordinary special powers, but for everything. So it's applying actually for our actions in our world, because we are doing actions because it's connected with desires and with other stuff. So then I wasn't like, because we know that Atma-vichara is because of our will. That's by our will we are doing spiritual journey, right? It's not in our prarabdha. And that because there was that focus on the will and the right and the good use of our will, which is very important in this path. Then I was thinking like, there should be probably helpful to know if I can actually achieve anything at all with my will in a worldly, like for example those siddhis, like those rishis in a Dwaruka forest, which seemingly they achieved some siddhis, but they were able to then create the elephant, tiger, right? So I was kind of puzzled then, like it seems to us that we can achieve actually something in this world by our trying to. That's why I was saying that the terminology maybe it's to me it's somehow is not clear, because like people can say that even just trying is achieving, and they can try all their life, even if they don't achieve specifically a result of some action, they can just doing actions forever. And that's what actually we are doing in the world. We are just doing actions and actions, like never ending, and then the samsara is going on. And there is no end. The end is in going back the way we came, right? And that's why I was thinking like there needs to be like probably I haven't found it, like if it's, that's what I was asking, like if there is actually possibility, or why is it, I got it, I can read it to you here, what my previous notes were, which are going to be probably similar, but there is something which I'm talking about now. And it says, so we are free to try whatever we want. If it's in our destiny, we will achieve what we want, or if it's not in our destiny, we won't achieve it. This gives impression that we can experience many different things if our prarabdha doesn't contain success or unsuccess. That's what I was like then thinking, maybe that this is not correct. And then I actually corrected, like, and I wrote, but that's not right, because I was reading the Upadēśa Undiyār, and then it's written that all the pleasures and pain resulting from our action is actually by the ordainer. So even my decision to try to do something which should be free is actually, it also depends partly on a destiny. If I'm allowed to actually even try for something, that's that Ichakriya Santra, isn't it? Satwantra.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
And can I just finish this one, and then you can say something about that. But so yeah. Anyway, that's why some people are successful with something and try to say others that everyone can do it. That's what I have noticed in those, like my friend I was telling you about. And like those New Age movement or Western spirituality focuses on the process. As I wrote you before, they say journey is important, not the goal. And then the question, why is it futile to keep trying and enjoying the process? And on the other hand, why keep trying to turn within and find out what this I really is only good action? And then is another question, but you already mentioned this thing, why it's futile to try and to turn our attention outside.
Yeah.
But then I got another in connection with the 13th paragraph. In what sense? Because it might be, if someone just read it, like doesn't know much. In what sense is different? Enjoy the ride, as it was said in the 13th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, and the enjoying life as it is meant by some positive thinking philosophies.
Okay, that's a good question. Those positive thinking, what they call positive thinking, is that if you want to achieve something, you have to think positively about it. And if you believe you can achieve it, then you will achieve it because you're thinking positively. That's all about achieving. That's all concerned with the fruits of your action. If you do such and such an action with a positive frame of mind, then you'll get such and such a fruit. You can become a conscious millionaire. I've heard the term. That is, because you're thinking positively, you become a millionaire by your own effort. This is diametrically opposed to what Bhagavan is saying, because what Bhagavan says is, you can, if you do something and you achieve that result, and you seem to achieve the result. Supposing you're a Dvarakavana Rishi and you're very angry with Lord Shiva, who has come as a mendicant. So you start your yajna and you release this elephant and all these wild animals and so many weapons against him. You think that by your effort, you are achieving these results. Actually, it's only your destiny that you were able to do these things. You have such powers, or you seem to have such powers to produce all these wild animals from a fire, because you've been doing these actions in previous life. This is the fruit of your previous actions, not the fruit of actions you've done in this life. It's fruit of actions done in previous life. So actually, nothing is achieved. That is, whatever we do, that many actions we do seem to produce results, but they produce results because that was all, they don't actually produce results. They seem to produce results because it was already predetermined. It just so happens in that case, you want to achieve something and you're destined to achieve it, but two happen to be in sync. So it seems to you, because I worked hard and I did this, now I've achieved such and such a result. That is part of the illusion. That is not correct. What you achieve is entirely according to destiny, which has nothing to do with what you desire or try for in this lifetime. It's the fruits of what you've tried for and desired in previous lifetimes, both the pleasures and the pains. Because not only are the pleasant things, if you cause harm to someone, that's a bad karma. Sometime you're going to experience the fruit of that. I mean, not definitely, but it's there in your sanchita, waiting for God. If God at some point decides to allot that to you. Another point to understand, that is, though there is a clear distinction between what we want to experience and what we are to experience, these are two entirely separate domains. They are what we are destined to experience is tailor-made for our present stage of spiritual development. So it may, God knows that we have such and such a desires, and that we are going to be working to fulfill those desires. So for some purpose, he may arrange our prarabdha in such a way that it often seems that we achieve the results of our. Why God does that, we don't know. That is, it's all, whatever it is, it's all for our own spiritual development. So because the prarabdha is tailor-made to suit us and our present desires and present the present state of purity of our mind, we may think that because we are doing things, we're getting such and such a result. It is not so. Another thing about the question you asked, what is the difference between these people who say the positive thinkers, the people who believe in positive thinking and thinking they're thereby enjoying life, and what Bhagavan says about enjoying life? What Bhagavan says about enjoying life, he says, surrender all your cares about everything other than yourself, then only you will be able to travel happily in the train. These people, they're doing quite the opposite. They think, if I think positively, if I do such and such a thing, I'm going to get such and such a result. They are carrying the burden on their head. So but they may think they're enjoying life, but actually they're creating problems for themselves. So we need to, the aim of Bhagavan's teachings is to remove confusion. That's why he teaches very simple principles. We need to grasp those principles, and then other things they all fall into place. I mean, they all everything else becomes clear. Another important point to remember: the clarity we get. We cannot get sufficient clarity merely by reading and merely by thinking about these things. We need to put it into practice. The more we turn our attention within, the more clarity we are getting from within. And then the clearer and simpler Bhagavan's teachings will become. And the more all these unnecessary thoughts and questions and doubts and problems, they'll drop off because they're totally unnecessary. And another thing about the Dharaka rishis, the basic idea behind karma is simply cause and effect. If you do an action, it has a certain effect. That's the origin of the belief in karma. In the Vedic rituals are based on this belief that people have, that if you do such and such an action, but instead of just saying, go about, if you've got a desire, you can fulfill your desire in any way you like. They're trying to begin the curbing of desires. So they say, in order to achieve, if you want to have a wife and many sons and many cows and all these things, well, the things in those days that were considered very the ingredients for a happy life. If you want to achieve all these things, you have to practice such and such observances. You've got to do such and such rituals. You've got to lead a certain life in a certain, according to certain moral principles and everything. It was, and according to the belief of the Purva Mimamsaka, that is the philosophy on which the Karma Kanda is over, the philosophy on which Karma Kanda is based, they have a far, their idea of karma is very different to what Bhagavan has taught us. They believe these rituals have a certain power. If you do these rituals in the prescribed way, following all the observances, you necessarily achieve your result. That is why they believe there is no, in one of the verses written by Murugan leading up to this, to when Shiva gives this Upadēśa, one of the things is they karma te andri kadavalile ennam. That is, they were believing there is no God other than karma. That is, if we do our karmas correctly, the karmas themselves are God. That is, because if you do the karma correctly, you will get such and such a result. So that is a very crude form of idea about karma. What Bhagavan teaches us, which is what is generally taught by Advaita, but Bhagavan has made it very clear and very simple. That is, Advaita talks about the three, Agamya, Sanchita, and Prarabdha. This is far more sophisticated. Whatever actions you do driven by your will are Agamya. Agamya will not bear fruit in this lifetime, but fruits of Agamya get stored in Sanchita. And that's why Bhagavan says in the first verse, karma giving fruit is according to the ordainment of God. These Dharakavana rishis, they thought, if I do this karma in such and such in the correct way, I will get such and such a result. They've got no room for God there. But Bhagavan says, the fruit of karma is allotted by God. You can do any amount of karma you like. You're just simply creating fruit. But when, how, and where those fruit of you're going to experience those fruit is entirely in the hands of God. So only when God selects a particular fruit from your Sanchita can you experience it. So that is the whole point of that story was it was a story. It's a story told in the Puranas, but many of the Puranas Puranic stories have teachings in them, and that teaching was brought out by Murugan and Bhagavan in Upadēśa Undiyār. That is, by doing action, that is, firstly, no action gives fruit except when it's allotted by God. That's the first principle, because action is jada. You need to have, God is Chaitanya, God is pure awareness. So only in the presence of that pure awareness is the fruit allotted automatically by the mere presence of God. God isn't actually sitting there. Another question I was asked recently in one of the comments, but I didn't have time to answer it. Someone compared it to God is like an accountant. Isn't it a bit far-fetched to believe God is there keeping an account of every person's every action and deciding what fruit? It's not like that. As Bhagavan says, all divine activity, it happens not by God doing anything, but in the mere presence of God. That's what Bhagavan says in the 15th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār. So all this law of karma is going on because what is God? God is love. So what the love, God's, because God, or let's say Bhagavan or Guru or whatever, that is, because Bhagavan doesn't see, because he's aware of himself as I alone am, he doesn't see anyone as other than himself. So he knows us as himself. So he loves us as himself. So that love that he has for us as himself is what manifests as grace. So grace is what is allotting the fruits of our karma in what is the most beneficial way. This isn't God sitting there with a pen or with a calculator or with a super powerful quantum computer or anything. All this it's all an automatic divine activity, as Bhagavan said. It all happens by the mere presence of God, because God is love. And so by his love, all this is going on. But the law, to try to have the law of karma, a law of karma without bringing God in, as these Purva Mimamsakas do, these like the Dharakavana rishis did, it's a delusion. It leads only to pride. Or I have done such and such karmas, therefore I am superior to other people, therefore I'm going to heaven, I'm going to enjoy all those, and I can produce, by my powers, I can produce from my yaga, I can produce elephants and tigers and all sorts of things. So there's none as powerful as me. Pride had to be put down. So we shouldn't confuse they were totally deluded by karma. Bhagavan taught us the law of karma that is in the prefatory verse, Bhagavan, Murugan wrote for Upadēśa Undiyār, it begins, karma mail tiendu, that is removing the delusion of action. I'll read the whole verse. that the meaning of the verse is, know that Upadēśa Undiyār is the light of jnana that our father Ramana composed and gave to Murugan, who said, for the world to give up the delusion of karma and be saved, tell us the secret of the nature of the path to experience liberation. So the whole aim of Upadēśa Undiyār, and indeed all of Bhagavan's teaching, is to help us to remove the delusion of karma. But this delusion of karma is intimately tied up with ego. So long as there's ego, we will be deluded by karma. So the law of karma as taught by Bhagavan is extremely simple, and is meant as an aid for us to give up the delusion of karma. So we need to grasp what is the purpose. Why did Bhagavan teach us the law of karma as he taught it? It was only to free our mind from unnecessary thoughts about anything other than ourselves. Because truly speaking, if we understand Bhagavan's teachings correctly, all thoughts about everything other than ourselves are totally unnecessary. Because what is to happen is going to happen, and what is not to happen is not going to happen. So our only responsibility is to turn within and subside, and thereby surrender ourselves.
And is it also worth to say that the Atma-vichara is actually the opposite of the karma, isn't it? Because it's a very
Atma-vichara. Yeah, Atma-vichara is not doing; it is being. That is, it is the cessation of karma. When our attention turns outwards, that is the beginning of karma. As the movement of our attention towards other things, that's how karma begins. When our attention turns back towards ourselves, the doer of karma, named ego, begins to subside. So without the doer of karma, there's no karma. So yes, it is swimming in the opposite direction. That is, the flow of our attention outwards is karma, and all other actions result from that flowing of our attention outwards. When we divert our attention back within, that is putting a brake on all karma. That's why in Upadēśa Undiyār, Bhagavan is constantly stressing being. In verse 9, that referring to the Ananya-bhava, Ananya-bhava, that he mentioned in the previous verse, which is Ananya-bhava means meditation only on nothing other than ourselves. In other words, meditation on ourself alone, self-attentiveness. And then in verse 9, he says, by the strength of such meditation, being in Sat-bhava, which transcends bhavana, which transcends meditation, alone is parapakti tattva. So here he emphasizes being in Sat-bhava. Sat-bhava means the state of being. So being in the state of being by the strength of self-attentiveness is the implication here. So there he emphasizes being. In verse 10, he says, what is, that is, subsidingly being, or being subsiding within, or it's a bit difficult. It's because he puts it in a very the easiest way to say it, I think, is subsidingly being in the place from which one rose. That means subsiding back into our source and just being there. That is karma and bhakti, that is yoga and jnana. That is the culmination of all these paths is just for us to be as we actually are. Not to do anything, but just to be. And we can attain that state of just being only by the strength of Sat-bhava. That is by the strength of Ananya-bhava, of self-attentiveness. So those two verses he emphasizes being. I mean, it's less directly implied in other places. I mean, it's hinted at, but then in verse 26, he summarizes the whole thing saying, what is what does it mean? Our aim is to know ourselves. So how do we know ourselves? Bhagavan says, Thane iritale tanne aridalam. Being oneself alone is knowing oneself. Why? Tani rendatradal, because oneself is devoid of two. There are no two selves, one self to know the other. So it is not an act of knowing ourselves, is not an act of knowing. It is a state of just being what we actually are, because what we actually are is awareness. So merely by being the pure awareness that we actually are, that is knowing ourselves. There's no, it's not an action, it's just a state of being. So all of the whole of Upadēśa Undiyār is trying to divert us away from doing back to just being. And what is the key to being? Ananya bhava, meditating or attending to nothing other than ourselves. That, in other words, that is self-investigation, Atma-vichara. It's another way of describing Atma-vichara.
Yeah, it's nice how he actually lead us through the first verses, through all those bhakti, karma, hatha yoga, and everything, until it's like blossoming the flower, isn't it? And then jnana is blossoming in the last 15 verses. Actually, in the context of this, I would like to ask you maybe last question for this talk, and that's, I got a note for it, but probably I will just say it as I think. So what do you think, or why would you say, is it important to first know ourselves and to remove this Maya or this illusion, and that's actually the way how we know the God, isn't it?
Yes.
And in the contrast of, like, many people are saying that everything is God, and they are actually like kind of seeing God in everything, in many things. Actually, in the Upadēśa Undiyār, it says like the worshipping God as 8 forms is a good worship of God, isn't it? But I mean this in a different way, like to still be caught in this illusion, and kind of like not to know ourselves, and just to think that we kind of know everything is just one. It's just, to me, it's very, I know that many people are asking this, but just to say, why is it important first to know ourselves rather than just to say everything is God and to see God in everything?
In verse 5 of Upadēśa Undiyār, the verse you're referring to, Bhagavan says, there's a verb there, any. Any means thinking. Thinking that all the 8 forms are forms of God. So it is just it's just an idea. We're not, when we worship anything as God, we are not actually seeing that thing as God. We are just we just have that belief. This is God. All the forms of the world are forms of God. That is just a belief. That doesn't. Who is believing that? It is me as ego. So that isn't. That may be a one way. If you do it with love, it can be a way, a means of purifying the mind. But of all the means of purifying the mind, that is the least effective, as Bhagavan indicates there in Upadēśa Undiyār. So what Bhagavan takes us much, much deeper. In verse 26 of Upadēśa of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, what does he say? If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. So it's okay as a bhavana, as a with devotion, if you consider all things to be forms of God, that's fine. That's a means of purifying the mind. But when you go deeper into Bhagavan's teaching, all these forms are all an expansion of ego. Because as ego, we rise grasping form. Grasping in this context means projecting. And the first form we grasp is this body. So we project this body, take it as I, and then through the five senses of this body, we project all the forms of the world. So all these are nothing but an expansion of ego. That is, the entire dream. Does anything in the dream exist independent of the dreamer? It is just an expansion of the dreamer's mind. So in that sense, Bhagavan says everything is ego. So ultimately, yes, everything is God. Because if you investigate this ego, you will see that ego is nothing but pure awareness, which is what is called God. So the ultimate substance of everything is only pure awareness, God. But the immediate substance is ego, because all this is the dream. What is it that we see as the dream world? It's only our self, not what we actually are. We are seeing ourselves. This ego is seeing itself as all these things. But if we really want to see everything as God, we first need to see ourselves as God. When we see ourselves as God, we see, but we are not a form. And when we don't see ourselves as a form, we don't see any other form. That is the state of seeing everything as God. That is quite different to just merely imagining everything as God or considering everything to be God. I mean, it's good to if you do it with a devotional attitude, that you consider everything to be God and therefore you alleviate suffering wherever you see it or whatever. That's all good. That's all will help to purify the mind. But that is a very preliminary practice. Our ultimate aim is to see God. When we see God, God means our own real nature, what we actually are. When we see ourselves as we actually are, we will see there's nothing other than ourselves. So what previously appeared as all this world is actually nothing but ourselves. So long as you mistake the rope to be a snake, you don't see the rope as such. When you see the rope as it is, metaphorically we can say, yes, now you're seeing the snake as a rope. But if you say you're seeing the snake as a rope, what does that mean? You're not seeing any snake at all, because there is no snake there. What is mistaken by others, or what was mistaken by you previously to be a snake, now you're seeing it as a rope, which is what it actually is. So it's only when we see God as he is, in other words, when we see ourselves as we actually are, then we will see that there is nothing other than that. So whatever previously appeared, is nothing other than that. The snake that previously appeared is nothing but a rope.
But unless we get there, there is not much point in saying everything is a rope already.
It's okay if it's done with humble devotion, and it's done. But people who very superficially say, "Oh, everything is God," it's useless. And if they or everything is God, if they're very if with a devotional attitude they say that is good. That will help to purify the mind. But if they're just saying it as a superficial idea, it's no benefit.
And also, if we take it further, if we get stuck just there and just then I mean, further in a sense, investigation, because what I see in many, like mostly religions, that's what's happening, that there are some ideas and people learn it and they believe it and that's it.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that it's bad. Everyone, for everyone is different, but I can see the danger in it. and especially like to know the Bhagavan teaching, then there is also like further path which you can take it further.
Yeah. That is the ultimate truth is extremely simple and extremely deep. It's up to us how deep we want to go. The deeper we go, the simpler the simpler we will see. We will see that everything is actually very, very simple. It's like this karma, law of karma as taught by Bhagavan is actually very simple. But we will see it as simple only if we're ready to go deep, if we're ready to follow why, if we grasp why Bhagavan taught us this and put it into action by giving up our concern with action and trying to turn our attention within, then we'll be able to see the simplicity. But so long as we are floating on the surface, there's no end to the questions we can raise. I mean, this law of karma, if you want to allow your mind to go outwards, it's very fertile ground for asking endless questions, which are totally useless. If we understand the basic principles, the problem is we rise as ego, and as ego we have a will. So because we have a will, we do actions according to that is the problem. The root problem is ego. The secondary problem is our vasanas, our desires, our likes and dislikes, and so on. In order to curb ego, we need to curb our vasanas. But the means to curb ego and the means to curb vasanas, that is the most effective means to curb vasanas, also happens to be the means to curb ego, which is turning our attention within. So it's so simple. We need to grasp the simple core of Bhagavan's teaching. Everything else will be clear. If we keep on missing the point of all this, then this is what has happened to Advaita. Advaita is essentially very, very simple, but over time, it's been made into a very elaborate and complex philosophy because people were failing to grasp the point. When it is said, you are that, we can forget about that. Who am I? That should be our reaction. But then we begin philosophizing. How did that appear as all this? It becomes endless. The whole point of Advaita is to turn our attention away from everything else back towards ourselves. That's why they say tattvamasi. That is you are you. It's you. Attend to yourself. The whole point of Advaita and the whole point of Bhagavan's teaching is to turn our attention back towards ourselves. So we need to understand all the teachings in that light. A lot of the teachings of Advaita, a lot of the philosophy is totally superfluous. We can ditch it. If we grasp the essence, we can ditch everything else. All these other more complicated and roundabout explanations, they are to suit people at different levels of maturity. But if we want to go deep, we have to grasp the simple essence. The simple essence is, I am Brahman, am I? Okay, then who am I? If you want to know Brahman, all I need to know is to know I. So forget about Brahman, who am I? That is the essence of it all. It's all these are pointers. Where are they all pointing? They're pointing back towards ourselves. So if we want to go deep, all we have to do is to try more and more to turn our attention within. The more we turn our attention within, we are turning our attention towards the original light. So we are thereby clarifying, purifying our mind and clarifying our mind. And then we will recognize how simple and how clear and how deep this is.
I experience it myself when I open a little, I give it a bit more room than it should be, then it can become like a never-ending flow of, you know what was happening to me? Like, more I was thinking about it, then I was kind of finding different ways on looking at it. And then after that, it came like calmness that, no, this doesn't make a sense. And I was kind of like, like making my mind around, like trying to crack it. And then anyway, I was like, that's why I was writing to you then, maybe we shouldn't do it, because it's clear to me, it was just like, if you give it more room, and there is maybe, you know, little unclear thing, you're just like falling into that never-ending questions, and like, but that wasn't my aim. It wasn't the aim to, you know, to saying something which I don't think is like that. I was actually kind of sure that because that makes sense. As you said, it's very simple. What Bhagavan said, and all I can see why Bhagavan was teaching it, just to give us less obstruction on our journey to turn within. That's
less to think about.
Yeah, that's what it. So I can see what can happen if we actually do the opposite. And disputing.
I think it is said that the Vijnana Marga, as it's traditionally understood, is Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Bhagavan emphasized the Nididhyasana, but of course, Sravana and Manana are also necessary. We need to hear these things. We need to start us on the track, and we need to think about them deeply. But I think the biggest problem is, or one of the big problems is with Manana, because Manana means trying to see clearly. So to see clearly, we need to grasp the simple essence of it. Many people are doing manana, but they're not doing manana correctly, because they're thinking more and more and more about it, and they're creating unnecessary confusion. We need to grasp the simple principles, see the connections between the simple principles, and hold on to those principles and put them into practice by turning within. Manana doesn't mean lots and lots of thinking. It means deep and clear thinking. So what you're talking about is actually, this is the problem that Devaraja Mudliya had. Devaraja Mudliya said to Sadhu Om that he always had difficulty in understanding why Bhagavan sometimes said that everything is predetermined, but at other times he said, but you have ichya kriya svatantra, you have freedom to will and act, you have to use that properly, you have to use it wisely. So if everything is predetermined, then how can there be freedom to will and act? And if I have freedom to will and act, how can it be said everything is predetermined? So he asked, this was a big problem for him. So he often asked Bhagavan about this. And he said to Sadhu Om once, whenever he asked Bhagavan, and Bhagavan explained to him, he thought he had grasped it. He thought it was clear. But after some time, he would start thinking about it again. And the more he thought about it, the more confused he would get. And then he would go and ask Bhagavan again. But what was happening there, he was thinking, instead of grasping the essence of what Bhagavan was saying, he was allowing lots and lots of other thoughts to come and create confusion. If we grasp the simple principle, yes, you have freedom to will and act. If you misuse your freedom to will and act, you do a gamya. But that a gamya creates fruit, that fruit is what is allotted as prarabdha. But prarabdha, when Bhagavan says everything is predetermined, he means everything that you are to experience is predetermined. And when he says you've got freedom of will and action, yes, you can want whatever you want. You're free to want whatever you want, and you're also free within certain limits to try to achieve whatever you want, to do whatever you want. And of course, there are limits on what we can do. I may want to fly in the sky like I do sometimes in my dream. I can fly just by will in dream, not always, but in some dreams it happens. I would like to do that now. But however much I want to do it, I can jump off a cliff hoping I'm going to fly, but I'm going to fall down with a big bang. So there's limits on what we can do, but we do within certain limits. We're able to do what we want to do, to try to achieve what we want to achieve. What we are not free to do is to change what is destined to happen, What is going to happen is going to happen. So if we understand it correctly, if we understand they're two separate domains, what is to happen is determined by fate. What we want to happen, what we want to experience is determined by will. They're two different things. Neither encroaches on the other. There need be no room for confusion unless we start allowing our mind to complicate matters. All complication comes, the nature of the mind is to complicate things, because the mind thrives on complexity. Simplicity is, what is the simplest state of all? The state of perfect oneness. State of self-attentiveness is a state of perfect simplicity. Mind doesn't want that simplicity, because in the state of perfect simplicity, in the state of oneness, there is no room for ego, no room for mind. So the mind will always try to complicate things. So our manana should be trying to simplify things, not to complicate things. What Bhagavan has taught us, that is, if we read carefully, Nāṉ Ār, Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, Upadēśa Undiyār, many of the verses of our natural Stuti Panchakam, we can see Bhagavan, there are certain principles, certain fundamental principles. If we grasp those fundamental principles, understand how they're all connected, we get a very, very simple picture of Bhagavan's teachings. That simple picture of Bhagavan's teachings is a deep picture. If we allow our mind to complicate things and to raise so many questions and to bring in, and we're not ready to give up our old beliefs. So Bhagavan says the world is just a dream. Yes, but how can it be so? And we try and question it in so many ways. We are missing the point. What Bhagavan has taught is extremely simple. When you rise as ego, all this seems to exist. When you don't rise as ego, none of this exists at all. Bhagavan's teachings are incredibly simple, but we must be willing to see the simplicity and to accept the simplicity. So long as we want to try to reconcile Bhagavan's teachings with all the things we want to, all the other things we want to believe, we're going to get ourselves into confusion and complication. That's how Advaita became such a complex philosophy, because people ask for wrong questions. We need to ask the right questions. The right questions, those questions that are tending towards simplicity. Those questions that are tending towards complicating things are the wrong questions. So we should always be looking for the simplicity, because in the simplicity lies the depth and the clarity, and also the subtlety. It's simple but subtle.
It's paradoxical that actually Advaita means non-dual, and it's becoming so complicated, right?
Yes. There are vast volumes written on Advaita philosophy. The size of the volumes itself shows that the point is being missed. Bhagavan said everything that is to be said in a few verses.